For decades after the Cold War, the entire world was obsessed with two kinds of power. It was the oil beneath the sands and, let's be honest, the atom within the core. Both promised influence. Both carried danger. By the early 1980s, a terrifying massive imbalance was emerging right there in the Middle East. Saddam Hussein, he was building his monument. They called it Osirak, a massive, colossal reactor. French-built, designed for one thing only: raw atomic ambition. The intelligence that came across the wire was ice cold. By 1981, Osirak was a heartbeat away from becoming a weapons factory. One single reactor, capable of giving a hostile regime an entire nuclear arsenal. Imagine that. For years, the major powers played this tired, diplomatic game. They warned, they pleaded, they imposed sanctions, and yeah, those were basically just paper agreements, weren't they? But a lot of those same Western powers, France included, were actually providing the technology, either through incredible naivety or through staggering, short-sighted greed. The clock was ticking down to zero. The choice wasn't if the Middle East would become nuclear, it was who, exactly, would get to strike first. And the weapon chosen for this impossible, world-changing gamble wasn't some strategic bomber. It was a fighter jet that was controversial on its own. The F-16 Viper, untested in a real fight, and about to be launched into the single most dangerous mission of its life. This wasn't a war. This was an existential, preemptive strike, and the truth of the planning is far more shocking than the actual attack. The briefing room was tight. The pilots were so young. The man delivering the final orders was a political firebrand, all fire and intensity, not a soldier. The mission required a level of surgical precision that had never been achieved in long-range, low-altitude flight before. The pilots were given two non-negotiable rules: fly low, and for God's sake, fly silent. It was 1,000 miles across Saudi airspace, a neutral, highly sensitive region. The entire success hinged on avoiding a diplomatic incident that would expose them instantly. The aircraft themselves were the definition of hypocrisy. These F-16s were sold under explicit agreements with the US. Use them only for defense. That was the rule. This mission? It was a calculated, colossal violation of the purchase agreement. A double betrayal that put incredible strain on every international alliance they had. And there's a more hidden and brutal detail: the training. For weeks, they flew brutal simulated runs deep in the desert, practicing navigation without GPS. They were taught to read the ground, read the stars, and rely only on the clock on their wrist. They were pushing the F-16, a lightweight dogfighter, to its breaking point. It was weighed down with two enormous 2,000-pound iron bombs. One pilot described it best. He said, "We were flying a fighter jet like a fully loaded cargo truck and expecting it to dance like a ballet dancer." They weren't just risking their lives. They were risking their entire nation's supply of future weapons from its greatest ally. The stakes were total. The Viper's secret weapon, the whisper of technology. This mission was only feasible because of a secret, a technical advantage. The F-16 was equipped with avionics designed to achieve the impossible. True radar and visibility when flying low. We're not just talking about hugging the ground either. We're talking about proprietary ECMS, electronic countermeasures. The stuff that blinded and confused the vast Soviet-built Iraqi air defense network. This technology was an American trade secret, and by flying this mission, they knowingly exposed its full capabilities to the entire world. The second those F-16 crossed Iraqi airspace, their digital fingerprint was recorded. Their unique electronic warfare signature was now compromised. It was a known commodity. And here is the unforgivable security lapse that followed. Within weeks, the intelligence community discovered that the secrets of the Viper's whisper were literally on the open market. The technology that protected those 8 jets was immediately rendered obsolete by its very success. They won the battle, but they sacrificed a generation of electronic superiority in the process. This technical betrayal guaranteed that the next enemy would be prepared. They learned the F-16's trick. It was 3:55 p.m., throttles forward, 8 Vipers, 200 feet off the sand. The pilots faced an enemy more insidious than any Iraqi MiG, the relentless, agonizing consumption of time and fuel. The route was complex. They crossed the Gulf of Aqaba, a critical waterway requiring near impossible precision just to avoid detection by neutral naval patrols. For hours, they were shadows. The silence in the cockpit was mandatory and agonizing. Every decision was final. But the mission was almost lost long before they ever reached Baghdad. It was lost in the air over the desert. The F-15 escort, their lifeline and protection, had to refuel in midair. A fragile, slow dance of hoses and tanks. At that critical moment, a pilot reported a shudder. A fuel line connection was momentarily lost. The F-15 had to break away. A precious minute was wasted. They were exposed. The clock was now running behind schedule. They were consuming fuel faster than planned. The margin for error? Gone. And here's the fact that truly unnerved every pilot. For a fleeting, terrifying moment, a foreign radar, likely Soviet-supplied, locked onto them. A sharp ping in the headphones. The pilot leading the formation, Ilan Ramon, who would one day fly on the Space Shuttle Columbia, made the call. No deviation, no response. Maintain silence. They flew on. They depended on the enemy, assuming they were simply ghosts on the screen. Digital noise. They gambled their lives on a technical glitch. This wasn't professional soldiery. This was an act of desperate, raw faith. As the jets approached the target, the narrative shifted from geopolitical to something deeply, terrifyingly human. Osirak was not empty. It was filled with Iraqi workers, staff, and most controversially, the French technicians who had built the whole damn thing. The intelligence was chillingly clear. The strike was intentionally planned for a Sunday afternoon. The assumption? The French personnel, the high-value contractors, would be off-site. But was that assumption correct? The ethical tightrope they walked was thinner than the wires in the F-16's own control system. One French engineer, Patrick Gilbert, was killed. He became the only fatality, a consequence the planners had desperately hoped to avoid. Did the planners truly believe the site would be empty, or did they accept one death as the necessary price to prevent millions? This is the debate history absolutely refuses to settle. This was the cost of a preemptive strike, the intentional, if reluctant, acceptance of human collateral in pursuit of an apocalyptic threat. It was 6:40 p.m. The target filled the canopy. The jettison was violent. The roar was deafening. For 90 seconds, the F-16 was exactly what it was designed to be. A blindingly fast, precise delivery system of pure destructive force. 16 2,000-pound bombs. The colossal Osirak dome collapsed inward, its purpose erased from the earth. The jets screamed away, leaving a smoking ruin and a geopolitical earthquake in their wake. The global roar, the fallout of hypocrisy. The international reaction was not a thank you. It was pure, unadulterated political chaos. The UN Security Council condemned the action unanimously. A rare show of global unity driven by fear and diplomatic outrage. The United States, the primary supplier of the jets, immediately suspended delivery of 4 additional F-16, a classic diplomatic slap on the wrist meant purely to save face. But here is the final controversy that lingers. Was the U.S. condemnation genuine? Or was it calculated political theater? Intelligence documents later suggested that key information, the window of opportunity, the best approach vector, was tacitly shared by U.S. officials who were terrified of a nuclear Iraq, but who needed complete, ironclad, plausible deniability. This strike wasn't just a military operation, it was a carefully choreographed international lie. France, already reeling from the loss of face and the death of its engineer, immediately threatened to sever ties. Iraq vowed revenge. The regional tension, instead of being extinguished, was ratcheted up to a dangerous breaking point. The doctrine of preemption was now established. Every nation from that day forward understood that if you had a clear threat, you had the license to strike without warning. And the F-16 had proven a terrifying capability. It created the doctrine of the surgical preemptive strike. It taught every nation two cold, hard lessons. First, build a bomb. Second, build it underground. By delaying the nuclear clock, did they simply guarantee that the next generation of WMDs would be built in secret, deep beneath the mountains, in darkness, where no F-16 could ever find them? The long shadow, the pilots who came home, the media celebrated the heroes, the pilots who executed the impossible mission. But the celebration was superficial. The long, terrifying shadow of the strike haunted them. They were not just warriors. They were instruments of a colossal geopolitical lie. And there's the final tragic irony that closes the loop. The F-16 gave them the power of gods, but it left them with the permanent psychological burdens of men. Their names were public. Their faces were known. For years, they lived with the constant, grinding fear of targeted revenge. Every strange car, every dark alley was a potential threat orchestrated by a regime they had humiliated. The psychological cost, it was incalculable. One of the pilots was Ilan Ramon, the one who held his nerve when the radar pinged. He carried the burden of Osirak for decades, a weight that never, ever lifted. His final flight was not over the desert. It was aboard the Space Shuttle Columbia in 2003, a mission where he looked down at the Earth, at the entire scope of the conflict he helped ignite Dash before he and his crew were tragically lost on re-entry. The pilot who saved millions from a bomb. The pilot who died, perhaps symbolically, under the crushing pressure of the mission that defined his life. The legacy of Operation Opera is not in the twisted metal of the reactor, but in the trauma carried by those who flew the mission. They were promised glory. They were left with an eternal, cold, unanswered question. The F-16 proved it could fly 1,000 miles for 90 seconds of destruction. The question for us now is, was that mission the salvation of the Middle East, or the foundation for its next generation of clandestine terror?